Presenting my PPT. Yeah. So let us start. I'm going to show this slide towards again end of this lecture also. But this is like the quick glance. So we will look at all these points one by one, but I will quickly read out a typical structure of a research proposal. So we start with introduction and explain a bit of relevance. Then we write a review of literature explaining the research gap. Then we write research problem followed by objective research objectives and hypothesis. Then we write a section on research methods, which also explains scope and limitations of the research. Then we generally write if it is going to be a book or research thesis or dissertation, then we write the scheme of chapters or what in colloquial language we call as chapterization, or we explain plan of research, and at the end we write bibliography or references. So we will discuss all these aspects one by one in this lecture. So how do we start a research? A research can be done for academic purposes. It can be done for policy purposes, either to understand what kind of public policy should be there, or in order to test the effectiveness or efficacy of public policies. Research can be done for journalistic reasons. Research can be done for market purposes to understand the market. So there is social research, there is market research, there is academic research. So there are many ways and purposes of doing research. And some of the things that we write in the proposal may differ from uh, one another depending on the purpose or objective of our research. In spite of these differences, the way in which or the method in which we conduct research and hence write our research proposal, there is some commonality. So the structure that we are going to look at today, it's more or less common to all these kinds of research. In social sciences, some of the research works are empirical. That means we look at the empirical realities around us. We observe the realities around us and try to explain it. Basically, we try to answer the question why something happened, why a particular party won particular elections, why a particular government scheme was successful or failed, or what was the result of a particular public policy. I mean, these are just few examples of what we call as empirical research. So social science research can be empirical, but political science or social sciences in general are not just empirical or behavioral. Some of our research and the research in humanities is also interpretative. So Dr. Akhtar just talked about Gurpreet Mahajan's work explaining explanation and understanding. So these are two paradigms in which we conduct research in social sciences, particularly political science. That some in some research which is empirical based on observation of reality around us is falls under the category of explanation. We try to explain our surroundings. We try to explain a particular political, economic, social phenomenon. However, many researchers in political science or social science and definitely in humanities are not necessarily explanatory. They can be interpretive. That is, we try to interpret the world around us. We try to interpret the culture, language, or even political phenomenon around us. Like in sciences, we can have cause and effect relationship. We may not be able to find that kind of cause and effect relationship in social sciences because we are dealing with very complex society, polity, economy. We are dealing with human beings, groups of human beings, their interactions, and we know very well that these all are very complex. So the way in which we can prove something in a definite manner in sciences, in natural sciences, we can't do that in social sciences. And so explanatory method is not always very useful in social sciences. And so we have many other methods, or let's say many other paradigms of conducting research in social sciences, which loosely we can categorize under interpretive kind of research. This was a bit divergent, but I just wanted to say that not though research proposal assumes a kind of empirical or positivist kind of framework, not all social science research is positivist or empirical. There can be some interpretive elements, there can be researches which are totally interpretive. So I am not going deeply in the philosophy. I just wanted to give you a hint or an idea that there are many types of researches, or there are many ways in which we can analyze the world around us through research. So let us come back to our main point, how to write or design a research proposal. To design a research proposal, first we have to identify an area or identify a topic. It cannot be or it shall not be very wide, uh, though it like students or researchers are generally very ambitious that I want to know about this particular thing in India. But we know that it cannot be done if we are too ambitious, if we are taking a very broad area, very long time period, we will not be able to do justice to our research. So, first, when we start designing or thinking about our research, when we start writing about our proposal, first we need to have a seed of idea, right? We need to know what are our interest areas, what are the uh, kind of works that we want, what is the kind of work that we exactly want to do. And sometimes it is given that we have a project and we have to work on it. Sometimes we do our research out of our own research interests. So, depending on that, we have to identify a very particular area of the work, very particular topic in which we are interested. Unless we are working on a project where the topic is already given, always remember that uh, find or choose a topic which immensely interests you. Uh, of course, understanding relevance is important. Understanding uh, what will get funding and what will not get funding is also important. I mean, it's not about money, like, but we need uh, some kind of support for our any research, right? So it is important to understand what is the relevance of a particular research topic. However, I'm saying that relevance is one thing, but interest is also another thing. And a good research will combine a researcher's research interest and overall relevance of the research to government, to policy making, or academia in general. So I was saying that while writing a research proposal, firstly in introduction, we have to introduce the topic, in which sometimes we have to explain the relevance of the topic, but also highlight the particularities that what I want to do as a researcher in this topic. Uh, However, I mean, introduction is definitely the first step. However, what is more important or what actually leads us to the core of research is reviewing the existing literature. By literature, in this context, we mean scholarly literature. Now, what is scholarly literature? Basically, the researchers, scholars who have written books, journal articles, book chapters, policy briefs or reports, or various social organizations, research organizations, which sometimes come up with some kind of reports. This is something we call as scholarly literature. I'm repeating that one of the most important or one of the prime step in designing a research proposal or writing a research proposal is reviewing literature or literature review. By literature, we mean scholarly literature. Generally, students or researchers, early or young researchers, confuse between literature review and review of primary resources or primary sources. In order to avoid this confusion, let me explain these two terms, primary and secondary sources. Suppose I'm working on uh, experiences of Dalit women as reflected in Dalit women's autobiographies. Now, in this particular context, autobiographies written by Dalit women is my primary source. However, some other scholars might have already written articles, books, etc. on this particular topic. So suppose I see that Sharmila Renke, a scholar, has written on this particular topic. Her article or her book becomes a secondary source for me. I am repeating. If in this particular example, if I am working on Dalit women's autobiographies, an autobiography written by a Dalit woman becomes my primary source. And a scholarly article on Dalit women's autobiography or Dalit literature in general becomes my secondary source. While we conduct our research, we use both these resources, both kinds of resources or primary sources as well as secondary sources. However, in literature review, we generally review secondary sources only. That is, we try to understand who are other scholars who have worked on this area and what is their work like. Because we don't want to work on the same thing that other people have worked on, right? Or we don't want to work on an area which has not been touched upon by anyone. That also becomes sometimes problematic, especially for young researchers. And so we need to have a sense about the existing literature, existing debates, existing arguments, and existing theories that are there already, that are given or propagated by the existing scholars on the topic of research that we are going to conduct. And so uh, we have to review the existing scholarly literature. Uh, another reason for reviewing, so first reason I said for reviewing existing literature is to understand who has already written on it. If someone has already worked on it, there is no point to do the same thing again. Another reason for writing or doing a review of literature is to understand various debates in that particular field, how people have looked at a particular thing. What are various approaches in which people have looked at a particular thing? Suppose I want to work on, let's say, sex workers in India. So there are some people, feminists, uh, who say that it is a kind of work, and so people who are in sex work should be given right to do that work. It is a kind of labor. It is a kind of work. However, there are some other feminist scholars who are known as abolitionists, who believe that the people who are in sex work are uh, victims. They are there because they are cheated, they are deceived, they don't do this work willingly. And so government should not recognize sex work as a work, but should work towards abolition of it. And I'm just giving this as one example. So if I want to work on that particular topic, I should be aware of the debates that are already existing on that particular area, on that particular topic. So these are two reasons for which review of literature is important. After after we review the existing scholarly literature, we have to find a gap. As I already said, that we don't want to work on the same topic. If people have already worked a lot, if all aspects are covered, I don't want to do the same work and write the same article because it will be waste of time. And so if I want to conduct a research and write a research proposal for that research, I have to explain what is the gap in literature. That is, what is the aspect, what is the area which has not been worked on by other scholars. So, firstly, in research proposal, we write introduction, after which we write literature review, and in that part or towards the end of literature review as a separate section or sometimes in the same section, we write literature gap. That is, what are the aspects which are not been looked at, or what are the areas which have not been looked at, or sometimes it can be that the current or present explanations, present theories are not adequate to explain new developments in a particular field, or you think that they are not adequate to explain a particular thing at all, and you want to come up with alternative kind of explanations or alternative kind of theories. So this is something that you want one explains in literature gap, that this is the area in which there is a gap, there is no existing literature. Now I mentioned that uh, one shouldn't look at Wikipedia and all these random Google websites when while conducting review of literature. So if we are not going to look at these easily available websites on search engines, where to locate this scholarly literature? One of the most important source on which you will find scholarly literature in journal articles is various repositories of journal, most of which are now available online. JSTOR is one prominent among them. Apart from that, there are many such journal websites or repositories of Cambridge University Press, Oxford University Press, Routledge, Sage, etc., etc. Generally, all the higher education institutions and libraries have subscriptions to this website. So, if you find an article on any of these journal repositories, they are going to be most probably peer reviewed, reviewed by peers in that field, and that's why much more reliable than random articles on websites and web pages. I'm not saying that everything that you find on other web pages is unreliable, unauthentic, but thing is that how do we know? And that's why when we go to JSTOR and all these sites, we are very sure. We know that these are peer-reviewed journals. Apart from journal articles, there are obviously PhD thesis and dissertations. In case of India, many of you will already know that the thesis submitted to the Indian universities are now uploaded on this website called at Shodh Ganga. Similarly, ProQuest is a website where theses submitted to American universities are uploaded. Apart from these, you can also look for books and articles, scholarly
Yo,
articles or
mama.
book chapters on Google Books and Google Scholars
क्या
just
होता?
for reference. Now,
हाँ
suppose you find out this
हाँ घर या
literature
साझे
and
खाना
read
गई तो
it
फोन ना
and
खेले
take
हुआ
notes, and now you want to write literature review. Most young researchers
तो रुआ के
summarize
फोन वाले
each
ले
book one after the others. They say that this author says this. This author in this book says this. This is a, an incorrect or not very, I mean, it's no, I wouldn't say incorrect. Let's say it's undesirable way of
हाँ.
writing a literature review. Literature review is not just summary of existing literature which is written
अच्छा.
one after another.
स्विच ऑफ करके कर फिर
A
तो.
good literature review will identify key themes, key areas, key debates, or key theories in that literature and would explain those important theories or important explanations one after another. So I'm repeating, a good literature review is thematic, that is
हाँ
organized or
बिल्कुल.
arranged or written in a
पहले खाने लगा
theme
जैसे कि.
wise, in theme wise rather than a book wise or author wise kind of
नाम साजी का लागे 6 बजे
arrangement.
करी.
And so you don't need to write
हाँ बस
name
वो
of
बनाओ तो नहीं
entire
रोटी सब्जी.
book or book title of the article, or like you don't have to give entire information in the literature review, in the body of literature review.
कहाँ जाएगा.
Depending on the style of
अच्छा हाँ रे
referencing
टुडवा
that you
ऑल द
are
बेस्ट.
using, you can just write author's surname and year of publication in the bracket, or you can use the footnote. But you don't have to write entire publication details or entire name of author and title of the work in the body of literature review. Uh, so let's
हाँ.
repeat what we saw till now. First, introduction, where you also
हाँ.
explain relevance and introduce the field. Second, review of existing
वो
literature, that is,
वाह.
review of scholarly literature. We also said that it is secondary sources which are reviewed in this literature review and not the primary sources generally.
एक है फेल होगा
In
लाग
some
ले तो
cases,
मम्मी
we
ते.
might have to, but generally, literature review will review secondary sources, that is, scholarly writings on a particular topic. It can be journal articles, book chapters, books, or reports by various researchers or research organizations. It can also be MPhil and PhD thesis because they are also unpublished research works. So we also have to refer to them. Then the next step I have already explained is the research gap, finding the research gap. Once we know, once we have an idea about the existing literature, we have to identify research gap. Another thing that I said was that when we write review of literature, we shouldn't write it ideally author wise, or we shouldn't just summarize arguments or key arguments of that particular work, but we should try to arrange it in a thematic manner and explain what is the general uh, idea, or what are the
अरे
general debates and explanations about a particular field in the
पास हो गई बाद
existing
में पास हो गई.
literature. Now comes another very crucial step in designing a research proposal, and that is research problem, or sometimes it is also called as problematic of the research. Many people, not just young scholars, but even sometimes known scholars, start their
हाँ तो
work or start their research work with answers that I want to prove
थोड़ा
this.
दूर बात है इनसे.
A good research will never start with answers. It will always start with queries, uh,
अनुज को
some
मम्मी ने
kind of
पकड़ लिया.
problems.
अरे
Problems as
ऐसे
in
आज
not
उसकी
in
मम्मी.
crisis, not like really crisis kind of problem,
अनुज की मम्मी भी
but
साथ
as
ही
I
हो गई.
said, query, question, why something happens.
जल्ले भाई
What
स्टोरी
is the
से.
relationship between this and that? There are, we said that in the like in literature review, we all look at already existing explanation for something. Now, where do we locate this problem? How do we know what is the like? Because arriving at a research topic is not that difficult, but identifying a research problem in that topic is the most difficult part of the research. A good research will never have an agenda. It will never have already already an answer. Like you can never do a good research if you already decide what do you want to prove in this research, or what would you want to find in this research. A good research starts with a query, with a question, that why something happens, or why this particular explanation is not adequate given the developments in the field, or something like that. Or uh, situations are sometimes more complex than imagined or than described in the existing literature. And so the next step in a research proposal is is identifying a research problem.
आलू गोभी की सब्जी
Sometimes in the research problems, we also include the next point that I have written here, research questions. So I'm saying that sometimes these two concepts are used interchangeably, but sometimes we use them differently. So research problem is a broader problem, while research questions are particular ones. Suppose uh, our research problem is
हाँ रख
something around, let's say, uh, empowerment. Okay. Now, especially in an empirical research, you cannot go to the field and say, okay, do you feel empowered? Or you can't really use empowerment in like concrete reality, right? And so research questions are generally more particular. Uh, that is, they are regarding something more concrete as compared to research problem, which is more abstract. It can be on theoretical or conceptual level, while research questions are something very concrete, something that you can actually look for in your empirical surroundings. But as I'm saying that this distinction is not always made. Sometimes we combine these two, and after literature review and gap, we just write research problem and questions together. Like we don't really make a distinction between problem and questions. But as I'm saying, but there is a fine line. There is a distinction. Sometimes we, by research problem, we mean conceptual or theoretical problems, while research questions are more concrete, more empirical. After we come up with a research problem or research questions, and there can be multiple questions, especially if you're writing a, let's say, a PhD thesis, there is an overarching research question to which your thesis will try to respond to or answer. But then each of the chapters will also have smaller research questions. Uh, and then these smaller research questions will come together to form the bigger research questions. And I mean, PhD thesis is just one kind of research work, but in our research work, I mean, any other kind of research work also, there can be multiple smaller research questions and one one larger research question which connects all these, or which includes these smaller research questions. Let me just give an example. Let's say research problem is explaining emergence of caste in politics of West Bengal. This is more at conceptual level. Research questions would be particular. Let's say to trace emergence of a particular caste organization in a particular community, or particular district in West Bengal, or to explain, let's say, uh, festivities and claiming of public space in context of caste politics. I'm just giving examples from the research works that I recently read or I'm familiar with. After we formulate our research question, then we write our hypothesis. Hypothesis is like probable answer to the research question. Uh, because as a researcher, we don't start our research in vacuum. We have generally a sense or an idea about our research field through some kind of pilot survey or pilot research work, or also through review of existing literature. So we have some idea or some possible or probable explanation about our research question. Hypothesis is that statement which states or which mentions this our proposed or probable answer to our research question. So hypothesis is generally a statement which explains relationship between two or more variables in our research. Suppose my research question is uh, has Kanyashri scheme, which is a scheme of government of West Bengal, whether it has reduced the age of marriage, increased the age of marriage in the state. So my hypothesis will be Kanyashri scheme has increased after implementation of Kanyashri scheme. Age of marriage is increased in the state of West Bengal. So this is my hypothesis. Which are the two variables in this hypothesis? Age of marriage and a particular government scheme. And this hypothesis is explaining the relationship between these two variables, that when one comes in the picture, another variable which is dependent on that changes, right? So that's why the terms dependent variable and independent variable. Independent is the one, in this case, it is the scheme, government scheme is independent variable. Dependent on that is age of marriage, average age of marriage in that particular area, which might reduce or increase after or remain same after implementation of this particular scheme. And so my hypothesis is that it increases because the government gives money to a girl when she attains age of 18, and if she completes her education, if she continues her education up to that and doesn't get married, then she gets money. I mean, I'm just using some random examples. So I repeat, hypothesis is a statement which explains relationship between independent and dependent variable. And in social sciences, many times things are not so so easy. There are no just two factors or two variables. Sometimes we deal with multiple variables. So there can be many dependent variables. In fact, there can be sometimes multiple independent variables also. Now, though we are saying that hypothesis is a probable answer to the research question, that doesn't mean after my research it will always be proved. A good research will always be an open-ended. That is, it will always be open to what is like found in like whatever is found on the field, that will decide whether hypothesis is proved or not. A very obvious tendency is that as researchers, we would also always like to collect data which will prove our hypothesis. However, some philosophers like Karl Popper have said that that might not be a very good way of conducting research, that trying to collect data which proves our hypothesis. In fact, we should, anyway, so we should try to disprove our hypothesis. And if we do not get enough data to disprove our hypothesis is proved in a way. Let me not go into those philosophical debates. I'm just saying that A researcher should be open uh, to the results or conclusions of the research. Hypothesis may not always be proved. After conducting research, we might find that our hypothesis was wrong, which is fine. Research is not about proving a hypothesis, but understanding what is there, like what is there in real, right? So it doesn't matter whether our hypothesis is proved as right or wrong, doesn't matter. It is important to start with it. It is a starting point. Lastly, how much time do I have? Oh, anyway, I will continue. So, the last point regarding hypothesis is operationalization of hypothesis.
Yes, you can take 10 more minutes, Madhura.
Okay, fine. I
Yeah,
will
yeah,
try to wrap as early as possible.
yeah, 10
So,
minutes.
last point is operationalization of hypothesis. I gave you this example of empowerment, and as I said, this is a very abstract concept. So you can't really go to field and say ki are you empowered, or you can't really go and find out okay this woman looks empowered. You can't do that, right? So you have to translate empowerment into something which is measurable, maybe literacy level, maybe whether a woman works or not, how many women have decision making power in family, or how many of them are sarpanch. So we can come up with a number of indicators of empowerment. So translating these variables in hypothesis into something measurable, something quantifiable is called as operationalization of hypothesis. So first is literature review and gap, then comes research question and hypothesis. The next step in designing a research proposal is methodology. That is identifying and explaining what would be the method of research. I think in eventually you will also discuss in this lecture series various research methods. So I will not take a lot of time on that. So uh, let me just say that there is no one or fixed correct research method for any research. It depends on lots of factors. What is the objective of your research? How and who is going to conduct the research? How much funding do you have? What kind of results are desirable? And sometimes researchers' interests also. So there is no answer to the question what is the perfect or most suitable method or research method for a research. However, when we write our research proposal, we can't randomly choose any method. We have to give a justification of research method, why a particular research method is relevant and useful to conduct that particular research. Generally, when we read research proposals
सर
written
अभी
by
तक तो
students or
कोई
researchers,
मैसेज नहीं आया बच्चों का.
the first thing that they write is that this particular research will use qualitative method or quantitative method or mix of qualitative and quantitative.
ठीक
That
है.
doesn't say anything. That doesn't really explain anything. So yes, we do categorize various research methods into qualitative and quantitative, but when you write a proposal, you have to mention which of the quantitative or which of the qualitative research method you are going to use and why. There has to be some justification regarding why this method and why it is appropriate to use that method. As I'm saying, there is no correct answer that this is why it is appropriate. But as a researcher, I mean, the researcher has to give a convincing answer to as to why that particular method should be used to conduct that particular research. In methodology section of research proposal, we also have to write the scope and limitations of the research. That what is the scope? That I want to see this, but not this. Because again, research possibilities are infinite. We can't conduct research on everything. We have to limit or narrow down our research. And this is the instruction or suggestion that we give to our most PhD scholars that narrow down. You can't do everything. You have to select something very particular, maybe a district, an area, villages, or a particular community or particular political party, organization, whatever. So in methodology part, apart from stating which research method you are going to use, you also have to mention what is the scope of your research, that you will conduct research on this. These other factors are also important, but they do not fall inside the scope of this research. So it is important to explain the scope. Limitations generally may not be clear at the time of writing a proposal, but towards the end of the research work, limitations are generally clear. So it is important to include them in the methodology part, that this is something that this particular research could not do. Uh, while narrowing down the research, it is important to also mention time period, if there is any time period for your research work, if you are going to focus on a particular region, particular state, particular district, you also have to give a methodological justification of that. You can't randomly select two districts. So recently we had a presentation in our university, and students said, I will select this district and this district for my research. And when we asked the question, why these two, the student said that because I stay in this district and I work in a college in another district, and that's why I'm going to compare these two districts. So definitely you can't give these kind of justification. Suppose I am doing a comparative work, there has to be some reason why I'm comparing these two districts, or let's say two states in India. Maybe one is highest on particular parameter and another is lowest, or maybe they are similar in some parameters, but still there is difference, and so your research wants to address these differences. And so I'm saying that the time period that you select, the geographical areas or regions or districts or states, whatever that you select, the population, that is the group of people on which you want to conduct research. So population that you select, all this selection has to be methodologically justified, and that justification should come under the research methodology section in any research proposal. Most research proposal just write quantitative method, qualitative method, or sometimes just explain that method, but that is not enough. In any research, uh, when we conduct research, we can't visit or we can't interview or we can't observe all the people on which we are conducting a research. Suppose I am working on Rajbangshi community in West Bengal. I can't visit each and every person of that community. So obviously, I'm going to use a sample of that community. There are many sampling methods. In methodology part, a researcher also has to explain why a particular sampling method would be used for a particular research. Uh, I'm just going to give you examples of some research methods. I'm not going to explain any of them. Some of the quantitative methods are questionnaire or survey method, structured interview, case study method, content analysis. Now there are many softwares which do quantitative analysis of content. So content analysis, which is otherwise a qualitative method, has now also, it is also a quantitative. Some of the qualitative methods include interview, focus group, case study, again, ethnography or participant observation, discourse analysis, archival method, oral history method. So I'm assuming that at some point of time you will get an opportunity to learn about these methods in detail. So I'm not going to explain them right now. I'm just saying that you have to, in your research design, in your research proposal, you have to mention which of these methods you are going to use for your research and why. Uh, Lastly, I will just say that you have to keep in mind research ethics, privacy, consent of the respondents or participants in the research. You have to keep in mind that you can't plagiarize, that is, you can't copy from someone else's work. So these are some things that one should keep in mind. The ethics, it's something that one should keep in mind while conducting a research or even writing a proposal. Now, I'm like again and again, I'm saying now this is last, but this is really the last. Till now, we talked about the design. What will be the design of a research proposal? Now, when we actually write research proposal, these are some points to keep in mind that a research proposal is not a literature essay. So you don't need to write a flowery, decorative, or ornate kind of language. It should be as objective as possible. There are small things. Sometimes people write in our country. No, you are not writing this research proposal as citizen of your country. You are writing this research proposal as a researcher. So one has to write in India. It doesn't matter what is your country as a researcher. I mean, of course it matters, but I'm not going into those details. I'm just saying that while writing a research proposal, one has to be as objective as possible. We shouldn't have any agenda already. I already explained it. Uh, Location of the researcher vis-a-vis research population is something uh, important to take note of. That is, who is this I present in the research? I don't think I have time to explain that. Uh, some more suggestions. Don't write any sentence which is not substantiated. Analyze data. I will stop in 2 minutes.
Yes.
Common sense knowledge or day-to-day personal stories are not data sets. Avoid value-laden or derogatory words. So these are few quick suggestions. And now I come to the very first slide. I'm just going to read out summary of this lecture, the proposal structure, introduction and relevance, literature review and gap, research problem, objectives and hypothesis, research methodology, research methods, scope and limitations, scheme of chapters or plan of research, and lastly, bibliography or references. So with this, I stop.